Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album, the newest EP, from the Chainsmokers, called Collage. There will be no way to talk about pop music in 2016 without talking about the Chainsmokers, even if you desperately don't want to talk about the Chainsmokers. And here's the funny thing, I'm starting to get the impression that the people who don't want you talking about this duo in deeper detail includes the Chainsmokers themselves. They probably prefer that you don't reference, say, their atrocious faux ironic sketch comedy beginnings, or the fact they were responsible for inflicting that viral marketing trash hit Selfie on the world in 2014. In other words, right from the very start, I had a certain distaste for these guys, particularly in their attitudes toward pop music, which can be aptly summed up in a quote they made in an interview with Billboard that I'm sure they regret right about now. Even before success, pussy was number one. Oh, fantastic. All the proof in the world that these attitudes typically associated with a white guy with acoustic guitar frat bro stereotype can cross over. The guys who never made music out of any sort of artistic impulse just to pick up chicks. Follow up with an awful live performance with Halsey at the VMAs of Closer, their slagging of the band Weezer as thirsty, and their much covered insults at Lady Gaga and Rihanna for either sucking or having no work ethic. And you can see why legitimate artists both inside and outside EDM treat the Chainsmokers with at best disinterest and at worst outright contempt. But look, we've had assholes in music before. I'm not holding the Chainsmokers to any sort of moral standard. No, what I find a lot more corrosive is how it feels like so much of their music feels like an extended con run at the mainstream public, abusing the past that's now common for pop in the cultural conversation to make some of the most cynical and hollow music imaginable. You might not like Lady Gaga's Artifice or The Weeknd's Nihilism. You might think that Taylor Swift is thin-skinned and vindictive, or Drake is overexposed and creatively stagnating, that Meghan Trainor can't back up her ego, or Shawn Mendes is way over his head. But when I listen to a lot of their music, there's at least a shred of an artistic impulse that I might not like, but it's at least there. Even will.i.am, who I used to loathe for his music as marketing savant approach, he at least took the music with artistic integrity. Even if he couldn't always execute, or rarely execute, there was at least something at the base there, some sort of passion. The Chainsmokers, meanwhile, freely admit to being inspired by Jeremy Piven's character from Entourage, and seem to treat music more as a marketing gimmick to enable their hedonism rather than any sort of art. So, of course, no wonder they've said that they've never considered releasing a full-length debut album, because that would enable critics to drag them into a serious conversation that they aren't prepared or willing to have. And that's the reason why I've chosen to cover their second EP, Collage, in detail. Call it a review, call it an expose, really the only chance I'm gonna have a chance to talk about these guys outside of Billboard Breakdown, so what did Collage deliver? Well, honestly, very, very little. But to be fair, I wasn't expecting a lot either. It's not like the Chainsmokers aren't in the business of making deep, insightful, or even all that interesting music. Of course, it's not framed like that, and the more I dug into the lyrics, the more I found elements that struck me as kinda lightly toxic, which is one of the big reasons why my attitudes on this EP slipped from indifferent to outright negative. As an EP, this is cynical and calculated, and the fact that it's as bland and tasteless, and to points pretty damn bad as it is the real crime here, especially as so many people are buying into it. Now, to further explain this, let's start off with our frontman, Andrew Taggart. He's only in front of the microphone for two songs that I've already discussed on Billboard Breakdown, Closer and All We Know. And on both songs, it becomes abundantly clear he should not be in front of a microphone. This isn't even a Calvin Harris or Armin van Buuren situation where the voices can have a little bit of unique texture and sound different and distinct. His tone is either weak or lacking in charisma, and he's either outmatched by a performer that's just as bland, Halsey on Closer, or is matched in a forgettable dead zone, Phoebe Ryan on All We Know. As for the rest of our singers, well, look, Daya is a poor man's Alessia Cara and a very poor man's Lorde, but at least she has volume and is clearly trying her hardest to sell Don't Let Me Down, whereas Charlie is doing a Christina Perri impression, and Xylo's brand of pitch-shifted and layered vocals got pretty grating, especially with that little squeal they do at the end of each verse lilting upwards. It's the one reason why Don't Let Me Down is easily the best song here, and really doesn't belong on the rest of this EP. Daya is plainly earnest, she's trying, she cares about what she's doing, which doesn't seem to remotely fit in with the Chainsmokers' entire appeal and modus operandi. And you want evidence of that? Look at the production on these 5 tracks, or really just 4 songs and All We Know, which is a glorified retread of Closer that swaps out those awkward glassy synths, the fake cracks, and that awful drop for an inert guitar tone, a popping beat, fake snaps, hints of hollow synth, and an utterly flat drop. Seriously, go to that chorus progression, it's borderline identical. Isn't the point of some EDM to have some punch and swell to it instead of this brittle, painfully derivative slurry? Say what you will about Calvin Harris, at least he gives his songs some swell. Say what you will about Avicii or Swedish House Mafia, at least they could give their songs some hooks with some real staying power. I haven't actually listened to Don't You Worry Child or Wake Me Up in probably 2 to 3 years, and yet I can recall every single word and melodic tone to these songs. Even Kygo, whose brand of tropical house is as ephemeral and airy as it gets, it at least dares to surge and build real crescendos and build drama. And Chainsmokers, they have never aimed that big, and it definitely shows. From the flat, hollow tones echoing across Setting Fires that leads to a drop that feels like the very poor man's DJ Snake, to Inside Out, where the buzzy synth tones feel pulled wholesale from Owl City circa 2012 with trap snares to boot. Again, Don't Let Me Down is the only song doing anything here that's all that interesting, and even then, it's only at the bridge. Before then, the desaturated guitar tone, the fake hand claps, the kazoo-like synth, the gang vocals, they only feel flat and lazy. At least the bridge and final hook breaks into a more sweeping breakdown as the synths feel a little bit more body, and even then, it's only in contrast to the rest of the song. It's still pretty damn shrill compared to better EDM, all things considered. And while I could go on about how none of this is all that original or challenging in electronic music, really is kind of derivative, or how there's some pretty obvious plagiarism, that pre-chorus from Setting Fires is near identical to a similar progression on No ID by Colette Carr and Frank Music from 5 years ago, and they really did it a lot better. But from a larger point is how none of the Chainsmokers know how to properly end a song or on a climax. They just fade away after a return to the initial tones, which only serves to emphasize how small some of these songs feel. They don't leave you on a high note. But you know what? Maybe that's the point. Let's put aside the general fact that dance music should have, swell and intensity, and say that maybe the Chainsmokers are looking to capture smaller, more complex emotions in the writing. Well, that would involve analyzing the lyrics, and believe me, if the Chainsmokers want to make a set of catty, bitter, dejected, and overall unlikable dance songs, they did that, as if those are emotions you want to associate with dance music. As I said earlier, the writing of this record feels kind of lightly toxic, most emphasized by the centerpiece track Closer. It's a song about spoiled college girls now hooking up with our frontman years after the relationship fell apart, where the Chainsmokers even get Halsey to play the sort of girl that this asshole fantasy. But it's not framed as an asshole fantasy. If the writing or performances were remotely self-aware about how much of a dick Taggart appears as, this could have maybe worked, but the centerpiece of the song is intended as romantic on the hook, thou they're never getting older, and combined with the disses towards her friends, it really feels kinda dickish, and that Taggart doesn't realize how much of a complete douche he turns off here. And hell, read any of these tracks with female singers as connected to the Chainsmokers in the romantic framing. Hell, it's established in over a third of the EP, 2 out of the 5 songs, it gets even worse. Don't Let Me Down is downright overwrought and insecure, kind of ironic coming from Daya given that debut album where she was overcompensating in the other direction. Setting Fires is self-flagellation trying to feed into some desire to save this guy by tearing herself down. Even if she doesn't want to anymore, the bridge implies that she can't stop, which is kind of unsettling. And Inside Out, the most self-assured song here, describes a knowing relationship as, I want to build you up and take you apart, and I collect your scales, you don't have to know. The women on this album either painted as calculating shrews or so helplessly intoxicated by the Chainsmokers that they drive into reckless hysterics. And nowhere is this framed as even good melodrama, which could go over the top to sell it, which of course the Chainsmokers aren't doing. And the fact that Chainsmokers themselves have said they intend for some level of irony here, well, neither the writing or the delivery sells it. It all rings as just unpleasant and manipulative and the furthest thing from compelling drama. And that's really what stinks about this EP. Again, it feels like a con played on the public because radio programmers are terrified of throwing anything challenging on the radio to compete with this, and a public who accepts catchiness as the baseline of quality. Look beneath the surface, this is hollow, manipulative, blandly produced, painfully derivative when not outright ripping off other acts, and so damn cynical. No, I'm not buying this. There are artists who are making worse music than Chainsmokers in pop right now, although I gotta say, Closer was a prime contender for worst hits of 2016. It soured on me, but there are few artists that are this contemptible. It's a strong 3 out of 10 and no point recommending this, because you've already heard over half this album through 2016 anyway, and there's no real need to hear the rest. Yeah, there are a few catchy moments, but you know what else is catchy? Gonorrhea. And from everything the Chainsmokers have done and said over the past few years, they sound plenty acquainted with that. In the meantime, this was charmless, pointless, and really quite tedious, designed to be forgotten when the next fad comes along, and the Chainsmokers are shuffled off into irrelevancy. In other words, if you can't tell, skip this. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Got the poll up here, so all of you who like the Chainsmokers can tell me how wrong I am. But beyond that, really, I don't see the whole Shawn Mendes backlash thing happening for this review here. I don't think the Chainsmokers have a lot of fans. I could be proven wrong, but they seem like a real silent majority act. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. I got a fair few added more to my backlog coming up today, so we'll see what happens. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.